¿Qué tal, gente? My name is Rodrigo Garcia. I am the Artistic Director of Teatro and your co-host, your host for tonight. Bienvenidos a La Hora del Mitote. We thank you for joining us tonight. La Hora del Mitote celebrates with Teatro 40 years. Well, not la, we're celebrating 40 years of creating theater to make people feel, think, and act to create a better world, and we are very, very excited. We are transmitting through our Facebook page and also through our channel in YouTube and Instagram Live. We invite you to participate by sending us your questions and comments. And I would like to start off by acknowledging that we are guests here on ancestral homeland of the Mowek Maloney people, who continue to live and thrive in our local community today. Me gustaría comenzar reconociendo que somos huéspedes aquí en la tierra ancestral del pueblo Mowek Maoloni, que continúa viviendo y prosperando en nuestra comunidad local de hoy. This evening, we have the honor of speaking with a wonderful person, a great friend, a talented artist, and a scholar. She is a Bay Area-based director, dramaturg, a scholar, la doctora Karina Gutiérrez. She is passionate about supporting new play development, fostering local artists, and creating welcoming, equitable, accessible theater spaces and classrooms. She considers theater a powerful space for social change and the mending, healing, restoring of communities. Karina, muchísimas gracias por estar aquí. It's a great honor to have you here and celebrate with us 40 years with Teatro. Bienvenida.
Muchísimas gracias, Rodrigo. Honor to be here.
Thank you, thank you. I know you're super busy, and I'm always chasing you, and I'm like, Karina, Karina. But it's so wonderful. I met you, and I was looking at our productions, and we met in 2013. So
Yeah.
It's been a minute.
It really has. And, it just goes to show you how long trajectories sometimes take. Because you met me right as I had really kind of arrived in the Bay Area and had committed to following this track. And it's taken a while. It's taken a while for me to get busy. It takes some time, but it just goes to show you, like, these are the places where you really get to cut your teeth and explore and figure out what kind of artist you want to be. And so these spaces are so important because they give you direction. And I felt like
Absolutely.
It gave me some really, tangible direction when I needed it. Yeah.
I think this is a great way to start our conversation tonight, Karina. We have, since 2017, we have created a youth program with the idea of creating a pipeline for new talent, but also to inspire folks to use theater as a tool for social change. So, as a way to inspire the younger generation, as well as the current generation and older generations, tell us about you and how everything started. We want to get to know Karina from the beginning.
So, I was born and raised in Arvin, California, which is a small agricultural town, maybe I'd say 15 minutes away from Bakersfield, so deep in the heart of Kern County. And I am the daughter of farm worker parents. And so I grew up working in the fields with my parents. And as you could imagine, there's very little opportunity for theater right off the bat. It's not something that was necessarily valued, but I have to say that I had access to some of the greatest teachers. And early on, they had a knack for telling me, well, you can't stay still. You like to read, you like to sing, you're really expressive. Have you considered maybe, going a little deeper into the arts? So I had some really incredible teachers in grade school that said, you might want to consider, yes, you finished your homework really early. That's fantastic. But maybe we're going to slow you down by giving you these books. And I thank them for it because it allowed me to to see past what was in front of me. I think a lot of folks saw Arvin, being so isolated as a deterrent from proceeding further. And for me, it was like, oh, I can get lost in a book. I can see a multitude of different opportunity. But really, I would say that my life really changed when I was in high school. Went to Arvin High School, Title I school, and got to see El Teatro Campesino perform. And that was a game changer. Because to that point, sure, I'd read House on Mango Street. Sure, I'd been, reading quite a few like literary greats, Bless Me Ultima still being one of my favorite books. And I'd been doing a little bit of Shakespeare here and there, but it wasn't until I saw my stories on stage that I went, oh, well, of course we come from a long tradition of oral storytellers. Of course, this is part of the human condition. And most definitely, of course, our stories, historical and in the present tense, are worthy of being produced and staged, and not just for ourselves, but for everyone to see. It was a game changer. It also meant that I saw a type of theater that was not in any way, shape, or form, mincing their words. It had a message. It spoke to the past so that we can understand where we were coming from, but it also spoke to the present tense and how quickly things fall by the wayside if we don't contend to honor them, hone them, respect them. And that had everything to do with policy. It had everything to do with how we engage with education. If you don't take care of the rights that people have fought so hard for you to take advantage of, essentially, they will go away in future generations. We will take steps back. There are people waiting. There are institutions hoping for the missteps so that they can usurp that power we have fought so valiantly for. And it, as I mentioned, it was a game changer, so that when I looked at where I wanted to end up at university, I at first, being first gen, wanted to make my family happy. So I was able to get a partial scholarship to UCSD, and I decided, ¿sabes qué? I'm going to find the midway point. I'm leaving, which is not something that a lot of parents want their little girls to do. I'm leaving further away, but I'm going to major in something safe. So I went in as a biochem major and quickly realized, oh no, I've made a horrible decision. And it just so happens that at UCSD, there was an incredible man who I still call profe and my mentor, Jorge Huerta. Oh. And I had knocked on many doors. Now, this is before we see white American theater. This is before a lot of these conversations about race, equity, and accessibility are happening in the theater, though we've had numerous bouts, but this is before at least my generation got a front row seat to those conversations. And so I knocked on many doors thinking, I'm going to be the next Sutton Foster. I'm going to go to Broadway. I'm going to sing. It's going to be great. And I knocked on many doors and felt the tension and felt inept and felt like I didn't know enough and felt like I was playing catch up and felt like I need not apply. I felt this big. And so I had a lot of doors very quietly and very kindly closed back in my face. And then I, in a last-ditch effort, with a copy of Zoot Suit under my arm, knocked on Jorge Huerta's door and just went, so I don't know as much as many of these students, and I would like to do what you do. He was a performer. He is a professor. He was directing at the time. And I went, I want to do all of the things. I want to do what you do. And he said, okay, let's get started. And the man was really, along with my drama teacher in high school, the first people, Sheila McClure and Jorge Huerta, Dr. Jorge Huerta, were the first that said, okay, yes, you can. And all I ask is that you be honest. And when you don't understand something, let me know and we will clarify. We will get you where you need to be. And it's because of Jorge that I started assistant directing at, unfortunately, the now defunct San Diego Rep under Sam Woodhouse, and was able to work minimally with like Culture Clash and learned about Monica Palacios and just deepen my understanding of that Chicano theater tradition, where it stems from, all the way back to like indigeneity. And I got lost in it and I marveled at it. And when I graduated, I went, okay, here's the first trial. Here's the first test. I'm not sure that I want to be the next Sutton Foster. That's cool. There's already a Sutton Foster, but what does Karina Gutiérrez want? What does that look like when there was at the time very few reference, and being an actor and a freelance actor now in the Bay Area was still incredibly hard in a different way, but very hard with few opportunities. And very quickly, I realized after doing the circuit for a couple of years that it wasn't an issue of possibility, and it wasn't an issue of talent, because there were so many talented Latino artists in the community. It was an issue of accessibility and opportunity. We were still being viewed as a calculated risk, our stories and our bodies on stage. And I thought, well, so then I'm not going to be able to do much as an actor, I think. And I realized then I need to be at the table when decisions are being made on what stories get told and how they get told. So I decided to go back to graduate school. I got tired of going to auditions as a light-skinned Latina, and I fully own that. Being told, well, that's funny, you don't look Mexican. And after one of these auditions for a theater company that shall remain nameless, I said, well, what does a Mexican look like, and why is that funny? I just got tired. So I went back to graduate school. I think I applied like a couple months after that and decided to really try to figure out what the mechanics, how these theater companies work. And I'm not so sure that I have completely figured that out, but I at least feel like I am, even at my age now, finding my voice of what is acceptable and what isn't. Cuando meter la cuchara, so to speak, when to sit back and go, okay, I'm going to remember that, and we'll revisit this conversation at a later date. Or I want to be part of the growth, the cultural growth of that company. It's allowed me to see things in a different perspective and remember throughout that process that if we're not looking for our replacements, i.e. if we're not fostering new artists, we're doing it wrong, because it continuously then dies with us. In theater, its survival is based on finding our replacements so that it outlives us. So
absolutely, what an honest and profound, I mean, way of looking at things. And what you just said, I think that the work for a lot of us is continuous, right? Like, I don't think there is a point where we say, ya llegamos, we arrived and we got it, and we, because like you just mentioned, 10, 15 years ago, we were not having the conversation that we're having now. No. We were not stopping or disrupting the narrative at that moment. And our generations and generations before us, they didn't even think. So it was not to neglect, but just time changes and circumstances change and what folks are having right now as a conversation was not even a thought for past generations.
Yeah.
And go ahead, you were going to say something?
Oh no, I'm agreeing. Yeah.
So it's always interesting to me. And I have my own journey, but this is not about me. This is about you. And many artists who begin with the dream to live their lives performing, but then there is this transition to be stage director, choreographer, not being on the front, but being like outside, more like the bigger picture, managing that. What has been your experience in being from wanting to be on a stage to now becoming una directora todo mundo quiere? What has been your experience?
That's very sweet of you to say. I feel like it's been a process. Es todo un proceso. Like there's no silver bullet. there were many moments in my life I'm like, well, how do you get the foot in the door? That's always the biggest question. I just came from, so the Berkeley rep ground floor just had this incredible gathering of directors. Essentially, someone from the Drama League came to give us a kind of a perspective on what is like pitching a show. How might we recontextualize what that is, and why we have to change our mindset, especially in this particular climate where theaters are closing, where, you know, artistic directors, I'm sure, Rodrigo, you're fully immersed in this, or like stretched to the bone, considering what does survival look like and what does tangible change look within that plan for survival, right? And I looked around and I thought, well, geez, it's so incredible to see like something like 30 to 40 folks that are like beginning, mid-tier, and professional career level artists that have gathered to ask the same question over and over again. There's no silver bullet as to how we kind of get into this industry. We really just come with a drive to tell good stories, a drive to ensure that the right people are in the room. And I'm not saying that this is a one size fits all. I can only speak to me that I decided to go the way of directing and dramaturgy in graduate school. Not to say that I've left acting behind altogether, but I decided because the stories weren't being told, which means I don't have a job. There are no opportunities. So how do we recontextualize how we view, you know, our stories? And this is not to say I want to make it universal so that we can explain ourselves to a community that's never wanted to know about us in the first place. Sure, finding the universals is important, but for me, it was, we need to remember who we are. Mm-hmm. So we need to find, whether it means a Lord theater or a small experimental theater that'll say, aquí se puede reunir la comunidad. Maybe it looks, maybe it's we take down from the pedestal what an organized theater looks like for us, at least for the time being. The dream is still there. You know, I just saw Mother Road at Berkeley Rep and was like, I heard Arvin, California uttered on a Lort stage, and it had such a profound impact to hear Octavio's words, but to specifically say the Arvin Sunset Camps or street names that I knew very well. Mm-hmm. I think on an artistic side, being an actor makes me a better director, and vice versa, because I feel like I can now speak to actors in a way that I feel is far more respectful, that is far more tailored to the individual than I perhaps got during my training. And I look at what it means to center the artist a little differently, having come from that particular mode, right? And I think having been in my position as a director, as a professor, makes me a better actor, because I feel, as an empath, I feel that empathy so much more deeply than I did when I was first starting out. So I think from an artistic perspective, I've become better in both journeys. We'll see. I haven't been on stage in a while, but I would like to venture that I would treat it with a different kind of care, having been on this end a little bit. And I think from an organizational perspective, it's allowed me to get a sense for the questions that need to be asked. Sometimes it's not a matter of opportunity. It's a matter of, are you asking the right questions? And I feel like now I have a sense of what questions need to be asked, not to catch people in a lie, not to, no nefarious intent here. Sometimes it's just not even being considered. I go to these conferences and I'll hear people still say, well, I can't find local talent. And I go, okay, but is the expectation that they're going to find and come to you? Or is the expectation that you're going to build, as you mentioned, a pipeline, a bridge between a community that we have to understand has been systemically and historically excluded from these stages? That's not immediately lucrative. You have to change your perspective on what these goals look like.
Exactly.
I don't know if I answered the question, but Here's my like kaleidoscope interpretation. I'm just looking at it.
And I have a follow-up that you're setting the stage for that. And I want to just remind folks that we are here in La Hora del Mitote with a great friend, a super talented artist and director and dramaturg, and please send us your comments and questions if you have. We have one from Diane.
Oh, hi,
She was very
Diane.
excited when she knew that you were coming in. So she's like, I had problems connecting prior to our session, and I talked to her, and she's like, okay, I'll see you. So she was very excited.
That's awesome.
So there, when we're talking about Teatro Chicano and the origins of Teatro Chicano, you know, there was a lot that happened with la gente, with like really rooted in the community experience, and the idea was for people from the community. We're not talking about like these virtuosos or super knowledgeable intellectuals in theater. We're talking about campesinos using theater to create awareness, to take action. And under those principles, a lot of companies and artists started. In your experience, how do we keep a balance between those values and principles and the need to also belong what is called the ivory tower, you know, in the academia, which can be very isolating and isolate others in many ways? How do we keep a balance? And Jorge, you mentioned it's a great scholar in academia, and he's great. But from your perspective, what and how do we keep that balance? How do we stay true?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about how I approach it in the classroom because I do teach Teatro Campesino, and again, it's my first love, so it's what I want to share with all of my students, ¿verdad? And I say just that. It came out of a need. It came out of a need, and what we're studying is the beginnings, which now may seem historical. There's a lot that we can learn from the historical. The challenge is to consider that this isn't dormant, this isn't frozen in time, it's ongoing. There's still a need for this kind of theater. And so couched in between me teaching, you know, el plan espiritual, that's LAN, for example, I always ask students, so then it took these specific events to transpire, or the need to essentially include our culture in our educational values at these major institutions, the establishment, for example, of, you know, ethnic studies, y todo ello. That's what motivated these students to have a series of sit-ins, to write this manifesto, among other things. What would it take for you? We're living in unprecedented times, so what does it take? It's important that we don't just historicize it, and I think that academia does a great job of cataloging and historicizing these events. And when we only historicize it, we actually get rid of the teeth that that moment had. And I want to make sure that we're not losing sight of the fact that it's still ongoing. This is an ongoing story. We've not, you know, just calcified it to the past. When we relegate it to the past, we've really done some damage. And you can still see remnants of folks that are doing the good work. I mean, the San Francisco Mime Troupe has been around for over 50 years. They actually trained a young, you know, Luis Valdez to then go back to the Leno and start El Teatro Campesino. They're still going. They still function as a collective. And then if you want to look outside of the United States, there's incredible collectives that are doing some amazing generative work, such as Teatro Yuyechcani in Lima, Peru, which has been, again, has been around for over 50 years, still working as a collective, still incredibly poetic and political and astute as ever, you also have these new organizations that are springing up. One of the ones I'm fascinated by is Las Tesis, which is this Chilean feminist performance collective, not theater in the traditional sense, but has this global following and platform because their performances are not on physical stages, but they're on these virtual stages, and has actually led to some of their performances being translated in a variety of different languages as a means of drawing attention to not just the Me Too movement, but really the condition of femininity in the United States. What does it mean to be femme identified or femme perceived? That's ongoing, and they're modeled after Pussy Riot, which is, the Russian performance troupe. So all of this to say, there's some incredible timely examples, and we can draw from that, and we can sense or hopefully take into account how this is not just a study in the past, but as Augusto Boal could be used as a rehearsal for revolution, which I think we ought to remember. We ought to remember that. And you also see it in the theater organizations. In the United States, it's much harder to work as a collective. Why? Because it's still a very deeply embedded capitalist system. In the absence of a national theater, we have very few options sometimes in terms of how we garner funding. We're starting to see this everywhere. The dust is settling after the pandemic, and we're starting to see just how dire the situation is. When you're not a collective, what would it look like to survive as a collective today? That's really difficult. I need to ask the fine people at the Mime Troupe how they're surviving, because it's hard out there. And yet you start to see a different movement with some of these smaller to mid-sized theaters. So I'm actually on the board at Crowded Fire Theater, and they have recently moved into this, they've changed their leadership model essentially to what is now a shared leadership model. So it's not a top-down artistic director, but you have like a board essentially of 5-6 individuals, all responsible for specific aspects, which makes the job a little more manageable, and make decisions collectively. And as a result, as a member of the board, we have so much more one-on-one access with our artistic staff, and are collectively making decisions to make sure that the theater is economically sound, but is also ensuring that more and more people are at that table as we make decisions, always keeping the artist and new work at its center, and always looking at how we are contributing to the vitality of Bay Area theater, which has its own culture. We're not emulating New York, Los Angeles, what have you. We are staying true to the experimental spirit, sometimes the provocateur spirit of the Bay Area. So it's happening. We just need to look at, there are these little threads. They're everywhere. It's maybe not intact as we study it as history, but it's there. It's there. It's very much alive. So I have to remind my students and then ask them the pointed questions of what it would take. And it's incredible. This generation is fearless, has a sense of moxie that I thought I had when I was their age, as I was scaling a building at UCSD, in support of the DREAM Act. And I look at what they're doing and no, I'm amazed. I sit back amazed at these students, what they can handle, what they're having to handle, which is not okay. Hello, fireworks in Oakland, California today. But what they're having to account for, the shortcomings of previous generations, how they're essentially handling it, and not just surviving, thriving. We don't give them enough credit. We just don't.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I encounter lately as I'm collecting material for our 5th anniversary, for different events, I came across a lot of pictures, not a lot, a good amount of photos from the times of Tenaz, back in the 70s.
Yeah.
All these, and seeing all these young folks who are now, big names in theater, Jose Luis Valenzuela, Evelina, Elisa.
Yeah.
Seeing them just so young and surrounded by young people, just going all these ensembles, meeting at the pyramides in Mexico, and just
Mhm.
seeing the passion that they had. Obviously, at the historical moment, which there was a lot of political turmoil around the world and the student movements. So
Mhm.
probably that helped to bring that that cohesion with these ensembles.
Yeah, I
Do
mean,
you see
it was
something
it was
similar? Go
yeah, I
ahead.
mean, I think it was a pretty it was a particular time, it was a tumultuous time. The 60s and the 70s had no shortage of issues to rally behind or against. I mean, it was a time of great change. I feel like we're witnessing something very similar today, and you see the rumblings. I also tell my students, like, this is a specific form of theater, a specific form of performance that was also doubling as a form uh, of education, as a tool for social change, as a form of activism, as a form of protest, as a form of social protest and performance. And our version may look a little differently. We don't have a stage. We're not trespassing the fields in order to get a message across. We may not even be trespassing on private property at universities now that they're starting to issue these free speech zones, which really freak me out, actually. What is that saying for how we have students manifest what we're teaching them in the classroom? There's a huge disconnect there. Uh,
Mhm.
but performance and protest is going to look very different in this day and age, and that's okay. That's actually really, really exciting. Um, I think of what followed, the weeks that followed these awful, awful, disturbing, and horrific events after George Floyd's murder, Breonna Taylor specifically in the Bay Area, in Oakland. That was a form of protest,
Mhm.
and the way in which they chose to, you know, produce this form of protest on a national, local, national, and global way can also be viewed as a form of performance activism. And my use of performance is not meant to cheapen the activism, the anger, the ire, the grief that accompanied such actions. I think to say that something is performative means that it carries action outside of the immediate, that it has the capacity to then influence anyone who comes in contact with that, whether it be live or live but virtually, or further down the road. So it may look a little differently. We may not be on the back of a flatbed truck, but
Mhm.
I also see a lot of borrowing from that era in today's forms of performance protest. So it's not gone. Like, you can still see the signature, you can still see the Valdesian or the Teatro Campesino signature in some of these ways in which we choose to be active. So I consider that to be a continuation of the performance. Absolutely.
Not too long ago, we had a group of youth working on the works of Francisco Jimenez, La Mariposa and
Oh
Breaking
yeah.
Through,
I'm
and we
directing
want
that
to.
at Santa Clara right now.
What was that?
I'm doing like a 50-minute version of Breaking Through for Santa Clara right now. So
Oh,
it's
that
so funny that you mentioned that.
we
Yeah, I love
loved
the
it,
work.
and I directed it for SEU Presents.
Ah,
I think
oh,
on
that's right.
2019,
So you right before the pandemic.
right before the pandemic. That was the last tour that we had.
What
Yeah,
a
and the idea was to do something together because folks were trying to do it, but uh, things happened and didn't work out. But Butch supported us and Francisco supported us, and we made it happen. And it was a wonderful experience. And in one of the days, we had a circle with the youth, and we asked them, why do you want to do theater? Why are you doing theater? And there was one young girl who said, I like to do theater because it helps me tell things that I cannot say with words.
mm, yeah.
And, for me, it just reminded me what you were saying, that it's not just here I am and I know how to move and whatever, just the performance for entertainment purposes. But it's the language, the message that uses these tools to connect, to the other end. And how powerful is that? And also I've seen and I don't know if I can call this a rebirth of the ensemble model. Would you agree with that? I feel like that happened before, then it lost, and then now I've seen and I've heard more ensemble.
Hay rasgos. Like for example, I'm directing a show at Magic Theater right now. Shameless plug. Go see Richard II. It opens in August 24th. I never thought I would be doing Shakespeare, but the challenge that Sean San Jose, another incredible, great artist the Bay Area has to offer, said, here's a challenge. I want you to take 7 actors and they will be every character in the world of Richard II, a history play by William Shakespeare that has over 14, 16 characters that come in and out, sometimes just to give a message and then just disappear. Some are historical. Sometimes he takes these like great, risks and changes the storyline to fit his need and his critique. And I found myself borrowing from that method, from the ensemble kind of idea. You have to be an ensemble. You're creating both world, and it's both world building, and you're also creating these characters at any given juncture. And I'm borrowing from the same kind of gesture. We had this whole workshop. I did a little mini workshop on Rascuacha theater, where I just said, behold, here's a bunch of junk. It's junk to you right now, but it is your costume. It is your prop. It is whatever you need it to be. It is your set dressing. And I want you to identify what this object is used for. And then I want you to energize it and let that object dream and create something else with said object. And so, I took a pen and I'm like, this pen is just a pen. It can be a pen, but it could also be a conductor's baton, or it could also be a sword, depending on how you energize it, how you give it new life. And I find myself asking the same questions, the same asks of my actors as I would with Campesino, which was absolutely ensemble. And I see that happening more and more. I just saw a production of Coriolanus at Portland Rep, same ensemble work. I think there is a renaissance. It's a variation on a theme, pero yeah, poco a poco, it's coming back, and I'm all for it. I think we have, in essence, sometimes forgotten to put the humanism back in the humanities, and that could only happen when you're playing nice and supporting one another. It's a great, not just exercise, but just a great philosophy to live by, especially as theaters are closing down.
So, sometimes whenever I'm directing myself, I always talk to them that the first few sessions are ensemble building, because I like to approach it as an ensemble.
Sure.
And I do some activities in smaller groups, and so in a very poetic, like sense, how wonderful would it be that we become a larger ensemble, everyone working on their own to contribute to a larger narrative that would strengthen who we are and what we have to say. Because again, going back to the beginning, that the conversations we were having 10 years ago are not what we need to have right now and what we need to address. But the human element is the same. We're the same. It's wonderful. We'll continue, and my God, we're a quarter to end, and I just want to
take again. And we'll talk forever. That's why.
Ya nos falta un cafecito y un panecito.
No.
So I want to remind folks that we are in La Hora del Mitote. Is live on our Facebook page, our YouTube page, and also our Instagram page. I want to invite folks, if you feel generous today, to donate to teatrovision.org/give. That helps us continue the programming that we do and support our artistic mission. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media and share Teatro Vision. And of course, very important, don't forget to join us our 40th anniversary gala, where we will be celebrating the way we know en el teatro, con comida, con música, con gente, and just celebrating the rich history of our company, that it's only possible because of the support of our community and talented individuals like Karina Gutiérrez, our wonderful guest tonight. Karina, I was trying to read all your credits, and it was like, no, that's going to take me half of the program. I see you have been involved with Bay Area Children's Theater, BRAVA, Magic Theater, Crowded Fire, Huntington Theater, Playground, Playwright Foundations, Shotgun Players, Stanford University, TheatreFirst, Townhall Theater, UC Berkeley, West Edge Opera, and Word for Word. And also, you are a member of the Latinx Theater Commons Steering Committee. How wonderful it is. The Theater Bay Area, and a founding member of Bay Area Latinx Theater Alliance Network, BALTAN. Did you ever imagine to get so deeply involved in something so complex as this web of artists and playwrights and dramaturgs? And did you ever imagine that?
I didn't know how complex and how interconnected and how vast and beautiful it all was. I feel like the more I work, the more I realize how much I don't know. The more I learn, the more questions I have. So I am always humbled by the fact that I'm invited back. I'm always humbled by the fact that people like you will contact me and say, yeah, we want to talk to you. I'm like, really? Why? I feel like I'm still in training. I'm still learning. I never thought that I would be in this position. I'm grateful and I'm very humbled by the folks that I get to work with, the folks that I get to speak to, the students that I get to teach, the students that are interested in what I do and want to continue to make a difference. I go, okay, the kids are all right, and we're going to be okay, and I'm going to be okay to pass the baton. I actually am really excited to one day retire and say, it is yours now. I'm here to learn from you. I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for these institutions. I'm grateful for these people more than anything. I'm grateful for these incredible artists that continue to fight the good fight and tell very good stories and invite me to be a part of those rooms. I never thought, and I'm still learning and I'm still growing. And I think that's important. I think the moment you feel like you have it all figured out is the moment you really start to fail. I have those. What's that?
In that same light, Karina, I mean, you're very young, very, very young, and you have accomplished so much right now. And again, that not imagining that this endless web was so complex. What would be your advice for the young Karina, the one that started dreaming impossibilities but didn't know where those possibilities were, or where would the journey take her? What would be your advice?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, chill out. It's going to be okay. You put, as first gen folks, we put so much pressure on ourselves. There's like I can't fail, but it's in some of those failures that you learn. And I put so much pressure on myself because I was so afraid to fail. And some of those failures were made all the harder, or were just inevitable. Like, take the failure in stride. What do we learn? What do we learn from process? And I wish I would have allowed myself, I wish I would have taken the fear out of the equation. I would say it's okay to take the fear out of the equation. Don't be afraid to fail. First and foremost. Second of all, I would have just allowed myself to even dream a little bigger. I feel like part of my journey now into adulthood has been thinking about, well, how can I make a difference within the existing structures? And I should have really disabused myself of that concept and said, what is missing altogether? I was still trying to work within the confines of these larger theaters, which, yeah, I'm working within those larger theaters, so I'm so incredibly happy. But what's missing from the conversation? What would make your life easier? I didn't allow myself to see what support even within these institutions would look like until a much later date. Ask for what you need. Asking for what you need or asking for help is not a form of weakness. It's actually a great strength. And I wish I would have allowed myself that opportunity a heck of a lot sooner than I did. And don't be so shy. Like, we're all just people. I get people, and it's so strange now that it's only happened a handful of times, which I'm grateful for, but I'll have folks come up and are like, oh, I've really wanted to talk to you, and I always get scared. And I'm like, why? I'm a dork. I tripped on a step before I came into this door. Like, honestly, I'm not that special. Don't be afraid to just say, hey, I really admire your work, or hey, how did you get here? Or hey, I have a question about what you just did. Like, I want to engage in conversation with you. And if someone asks that of you, take that as a huge honorific. That means they want to engage with you as a person, as an artist. Don't be a jerk. But, ask questions. Don't be shy. These are just people. I was at a gala for magic yesterday, and I saw Richard Montoya. And I'd met the man when I was 19 years old in San Diego, and I was so shy. And I was an AD for a production of Water and Power they did at the Rep. And I remember, 19-year-old Gary came out, and I was just like, oh my goodness, I haven't seen this person. They're not going to remember me. I probably didn't contribute enough, even though I know I worked really hard. But, why would they remember me? And I made myself get out of Gary brain and, went and said, hi, Richard, how are you? And I introduced myself. And he goes, where have I met you before? And I explained I was 19 years old. And he goes, oh, I do remember you. I remember X, Y, and Z. And I was like, oh, this is how connections and familia is forged.
Yeah.
Reminder that we are all interconnected and have each other's back and want each other to succeed and do great work. And I was very flattered and humbled that he remembered an 19-year-old. And then I proceeded to talk about how I teach his work. And I hope that he understood what an impact having worked with him at 19 left on me. Have those conversations. Don't be shy. Really don't be shy. I know it's easier said than done.
You said something earlier about un consejo que te dio Jorge about if you don't know, ask. If you don't understand, ask. I think a lot of times we come with this hesitation of like, I'm not good enough. I don't know enough. Therefore, I cannot be part of a conversation.
Yeah.
And what if they ask me something that I don't know? I'm gonna look, just we tend to sabotage ourselves.
Yeah.
And I love what you're saying, just go with it. Get out of that, because you don't know what that's gonna take you. Again, this 19-year-old girl with big dreams now is teaching others, and that experience, it's so beautiful and inspiring. And if you would have stayed in that state of mind,
I would have never made it
you
out
would
of
have
the gate.
never.
No.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly.
And The biggest flex, I always tell my students, the biggest flex is being able to look at a room full of folks and say, you know what? I don't know. I do not know the answer to that. Not trying to make something up, not trying to make yourself seem smarter, not using $10 words, to be able to say in a room full of folks, I do not know. I'm directing Shakespeare for the first time in my life, and I'm in a room with equity actors, and sometimes they'll ask me a question and I have to look at them and I go, you know what? I don't know. Let's figure this out together. And they'll come up with something so magical that I go, fantastic, let's do that. Sometimes the power of just saying, I do not know, is an offering and an opportunity to do something even greater than you would have imagined.
I think it's beautiful to remain in that state of wonder too, and from the teachings of Freire and Boal about the student and the teacher. This constant teaching and learning, and that is about just opening that, live in a state of wonder. I mean, like you said, it's easier to say than to do, but I think it is a very honest and much simpler way of living our complicated lives.
Yes.
Than second guessing ourselves every single time that we're going to do something.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree. And the world is already so hard. Art should be liberating. Even when you're talking about some really difficult subjects, you still have to find the joy. You still have to find the levity. And it should be something you're excited to come to the table. It shouldn't be something you dread. It's not a test. It shouldn't be a test. Exactly.
And you should enjoy it.
You should enjoy it. And I do. Even when it's challenging, I'm like, okay, but how can I fix this? This is now a puzzle. Okay, but what is the lesson for me? Okay, this is a journey. Let's follow the thread. I learn something new every day. I'm only as good as my team. I have excellent teams. I'm so grateful to them for that. And I love what I do. If you allow yourself to do it, you should love what you do. Even when you're fighting or arguing with people to do better, like, you love what you do. You want to protect it. You want to make it better. You want to preserve it for people that follow. That should be the goal.
And Karina, we're approaching to the end. We're almost at the end, but this, I'm sorry, this, when we met and when we did Macario, the world premiere of Macario, which you were la primer mujer, and you will always be la primer mujer. And Russell still dreams that you would be able to do La Mujer. Now that La Mujer sings more than one song, he always like, Karina available? Because I composed it for Karina's voice. Like, no, Karina's not available. She cannot do it, so you got to make changes. Yeah, but anyway.
You know what would be a really good idea? Because, like, things have changed since 2013. But, Hugo, who played Macario, who was the first Macario, is also doing some incredible work. He's doing this commercial work in LA now. He's going to be up at ACT doing a show in the fall. Like, it would be really cool to get like the original cast together, even if we did something in concert. I'm planting the seed right now. Sometime in the future, getting the cast together to just do like little scenelets. That should be the next fundraiser. And then I would you get Hugo to do it. Hugo and I, we must. Just saying.
I would love it. I would love it. I saw him
director, but I think it'd be rad.
I saw Hugo and Sarita in Private Lies.
That's what's coming to ACT. I'm so excited.
They were wonderful. And since we're talking about Hugo, I have this really bad resolution.
That's hilarious. You need to send me that picture. Oh,
I will. And you know what is hilarious? When we look at the recording of the first Macario, we were like, oh my God, we didn't have resources. All our set was those big paredes and the big chair where I sat as the inquisitor, and the church that came down, and that was it. I
That
mean, it
was
was
it.
like really
Oh,
bare bones. Here's another picture of you and Jovita and
Vita.
kids that are now grown-ups doing wonderful things.
Oh my gosh,
Uh,
yeah, I've seen some of them through social media, and I'm like, these babies, I remember them as babies. They were so sweet,
yeah.
and now they're full-grown adults.
And a lot of them remember you. What some of them came back to work with us, and they will always remember you. Lupe always remembers you. Hugo
Lupe.
remembers you, and here's again, going back to that anecdote that you shared about that 19-year-old Karina. We present into the world in ways that we don't know, and we don't know what the impact is going to be on others. And something that I take from this conversation and from knowing you is just to remain honest,
Yeah.
not pretend what you don't have, what you don't know. Just just be honest.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed.
Karina, we are now at the end of our Plática. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time. I know that you're super busy, and again, I always am like, oh my God, please don't hire her so I can have her. No,
Someday
no,
it'll
no,
come
please.
back full circle. It'll come back.
Oh, mira, aquí uno de tus fans.
Oh, Hugo Badu. Oh my gosh. Sweetest humans. Oh my gosh. Just the best.
He's now our Macario, and again, he started with Teatro Visión in Macario, and now he has had his own journey. But again, him and many more people that you touched when you
Yeah.
were with us still remember you. We remember you. It was my first and only experience that I had working with you, and it was, since I met you, I was very touched and inspired by the work that you do, and I continue to be. That's why I will always be chasing you. So
Please don't
no te
stop.
vas a deshacer
We'll
de
find
mí.
the time. No, no, no. ¿Sabes qué? Va a llegar el momento. Eso sí, le aseguro que va a llegar el momento, pero we need a little reunion at some point, because even looking at these pictures and seeing some of these folks pop up, like I have such beautiful memories with these incredible humans. We really did come together as a cast. It was unlike anything. It was just special, unlike
Mhm.
anything I'd experienced before. And again, it just solidified why I needed to be the type of director, professor, dramaturg that I am, because look at who this company fostered and continues to foster. So, todo el amor en el mundo to my cast of Macario. And to everyone at Teatro Visión. And Rodrigo, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. May this be the first of many to come in not so short order. Sí, reunión con tacos, porfas. Tú dime cuándo. Let the show open y órale. I'm there.
Karina, ya que nos vamos, can you tell us your production again, and where can people um, learn more about your work?
Absolutely. So I'm updating my website, so please don't judge me. But you can go to Karina Gutiérrez directing.com to learn a little bit more about what I'm working on. But the show that's next on the docket is Richard II at the Magic Theater. That's in Fort Mason in San Francisco. And it's not your typical Shakespeare. When you think, oh God, Karina's inviting. We just talked about Teatro Gutierrez. We just talked about Teatro Gutiérrez, and you're telling me to go see Shakespeare. No, it's an adaptation. So it's a translation of the original text by Naomi Azuka, who's an incredible playwright. And it's through an organization called Play on Shakespeare. And what Play on Shakespeare does is it actually enlists contemporary playwrights to translate, meaning not adapt, but update the language, making the Shakespeare a little more amenable to the contemporary ear. So it really kind of invites you back into the drama of it all. And this is also about a 90-minute version of Richard II. So it's also not going to be your 2.5-hour long production. It gets at the root of what the story is about, which I, as a director, ask, do we ever have the right to usurp power by force? I think that's what's at the heart of this story and how it connects to our contemporary world. So if you're interested, the show opens August 24th and it runs through September 8th, and you can get tickets at magictheater.org.
Magictheater.org.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, folks, you know where to learn from Karina and about her work. If you want to just get in touch with her, hire her, get inspired, go to karinagutierrez.com. She is directing Richard II at the Magic Theater. You can find more information at magictheater.org. And with that, we say goodbye to our audience. Thank you again, Karina, for being our guest tonight. Y bueno, pues ya dijiste, te vamos a buscar y te vamos a seguir buscando donde te encontremos para vernos pronto. Muchísimas gracias, and we'll see you at the 40th anniversary gala on August 24th. Television.org, that's where you can get your tickets. Muchísimas gracias y hasta la próxima.
Hasta la próxima.